Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Surah Al-Baqarah, verses 219 to 221. Lesson of the Holy Quran by the thinker of the Quran, Allama Ahmad Parwez. My dear brothers, today is the 25th of May, 1969, and in this new series of Quranic lessons, we begin with verse 219 of Surah Al-Baqarah. The Quran provides the foundation of a new system and a new society on earth. The discussion has been continuing that the Quran seeks to establish a new order, to organize a new community. To become a member of this society, the first condition is that one must sign a declaration. This is what is called bringing faith or accepting Islam. That declaration is, إن الله اشترى من المؤمنين أنفسهم وأموالهم بأن لهم الجنة 9:111. Indeed, Allah has purchased from the believers their lives and their wealth in exchange for paradise. This is, in today's terminology, the membership form. Once a person fills it, he becomes a member of the Islamic society, that is, a Muslim. From here, the matter progresses gradually to its ultimate stage. The society takes from its members whatever is needed. When wealth is required, it takes wealth. When life is required, it takes life. Ultimately, the society guarantees every individual his basic necessities of life. At that stage, there remains no need for anyone to keep surplus wealth or capital for himself. This is the final limit to which the Quran wants to bring the community. Details of obstacles created by Khamr and Maisiyat in the formation of a Quranic society. Before reaching that ultimate stage, the Quran explains what obstacles stand in the way, what things block a person's path and prevent him from coming forward. At this point, it mentions two matters. يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْخَمْرِ وَالْمَيْسِيرِ قُلْ فِيهِمَا إِثْمٌ كَبِيرٌ وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ وَإِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا. They ask you about Khamr and Maisir. Say in them is great sin and benefits for people, but their sin is greater than their benefit. Khamr is generally translated as wine, and Maisiyat as gambling. Wine and gambling are included in these, but the matter is not limited to them. Their scope is much wider. Khamr refers to anything that covers or veils something else. The word khimar or khumr is used for a covering, such as a veil or cloth that covers the head. Thus, every substance that veils the intellect falls under khamr. This includes those things which, when consumed physically, place a covering over human reason. The greatest veil over human intellect is man-made religion. My dear brothers, there are countless things which are not consumed physically, yet they paralyze the intellect even more than intoxicants. The greatest of these is man's own self-made religion. The foundation of such religion is the claim that in matters of faith, understanding, thought, intellect, and reasoning have no role. An alcoholic at least occasionally regains his senses, but the devotee of rigid religiosity never does. The day he begins to think clearly, a verdict is passed against him declaring him an apostate or a heretic. This very condition which renders the intellect ineffective is what the Quran calls khamr. Every intoxicating substance falls under this category, as I have already explained. In their time, wine was the most common intoxicant, which is why the word was also applied to it. The fundamental characteristic of a Quranic society is the awakening of intellect and reason. As I have already explained, the first obstacle is that which paralyzes human intellect. Therefore, the new society which the Quran seeks to establish is founded upon intellect, thought, consciousness, reason, and rationalism. Hence, anything that dulls or suspends human reasoning must be avoided. The technique of religion in obtaining financial support. Generally, you must have observed that when appeals for donations are made, they are directed purely at emotions. The audience is brought to a climax of excitement. Their feelings are stirred, and this too is a form of khamr. When emotions are inflamed, the faculties of thought and understanding are suspended, even if only for a short time. This is what is called magic in speech, the ability to stir emotions so intensely that rational faculties are paralyzed, and in that moment their pockets are emptied.
But in the Quranic system, the matter is entirely opposite. Here, intellect and consciousness are awakened and strengthened to such an extent that a person, after understanding and reflecting, willingly empties his pockets. This is stable and enduring, unlike intoxication, which is always temporary. When the faculties of intellect and thought are awakened and matured, they remain permanent, providing firmness and stability. Thus, when the Quran speaks of khamr, the first point is that it refers to anything which suspends or paralyzes the powers of intellect and thought. The role of human brain in intellect and consciousness, different from animals. Doctors know better that the human body system is such that within the brain there are compartments where, when information from outside reaches, decisions are made about what should be done. This is called intellectual, rational, or conscious decision-making. The nerves convey external information to the brain. The Quran mentions sam, basar, and fu'ad. Sam, hearing, and basar, sight, are the channels through which information from the outside world reaches, while fu'ad is the seat of the mind, the part of the brain where reflection and thought lead to conclusions. This process functions when the brain is active, but there are certain actions called reflex actions which do not involve intellect or thought. For example, if someone pricks the sole of a sleeping person's foot, he will withdraw it instantly, though he is deeply asleep and unaware. Later, when awake, he will not even know that he had moved his foot. This is not a conscious act, but an automatic reaction. In such states, sleep or intoxication, the nerves that carry signals from the body to the brain are cut off at a point in the neck before reaching the brain. For a short time, the connection is severed, like a trolley separating from its rocket. This disconnection is what we call sleep or intoxication. In these conditions, actions remain reflexive, not conscious or thoughtful. Reflex action means that certain responses occur automatically without intellectual processing. For example, when you are deeply engaged in something and a fly sits on you, you brush it away without thinking. Or when something suddenly comes close to your eye, you blink instantly. These are not results of thought or consciousness, but reflex actions. The nerves themselves trigger these responses. Thus, when the connection between the nerves and the brain's conscious center is cut off, whatever actions occur are reflexive, not based on intellect or reasoning. This distinction explains how human consciousness differs from mere animal instinct. The nature of actions under the intoxication of wine and their place in humanity. In the state of intoxication caused by wine, the movements that occur are similar to those of a sleeping person who withdraws his foot or raises his hand without knowing what he is doing. Man descends to the level of an animal. Every action of an animal is a reflex action because it lacks the substance of thought and consciousness. The first effect of intoxication is that man falls from the human level to the animal level. Consider that religion, whose purpose is to elevate humanity to such heights that it surpasses the bounds of the heavens and the earth, what relation can it have with a person who lowers himself from the human level to the animal level? In the intoxication of wine, one particular feature is that the sense of I within a person becomes excessively inflated. You must have observed that a drunkard rarely refers to himself as I. Instead, he says we. He will say, "Oi tu sanu samjha ki hega," rather than "Mainu ki samjha." He will declare, "Oi asi bade oh nahi hai gaya." His ego swells so much that everything else appears insignificant, while his own I seems magnified with arrogance and pride. It is said that Maharaja Ranjit Singh, 1780 to 1839, once riding on an elephant in procession, encountered a man completely intoxicated. The drunkard, in his state, shouted boldly at the Maharaja, addressing him without fear. This illustrates how intoxication inflates the ego and diminishes the sense of proportion, reducing man to a state of animality. The first point is this: "O khanaya de tattu ki vich nahi, hathi tattu dasa anda." O khen laga, "Ha bhai, vech deange, kal sauda karange." The Maharaja ordered a soldier to seize him, and he was kept overnight. By morning, the intoxication had worn off. He was brought before the court, and the Maharaja said, "Listen, the deal we spoke of yesterday must be finalized today." The drunkard replied, "Gee, that traitor has already departed." He was a traitor only as long as he referred to himself as we. In his intoxicated state, he perceived the Maharaja's elephant as a mere pony, while his own inflated ego made him see himself as greater. In the intoxication of wine, when man descends to the level of animality, his animal instincts rise so strongly that everything else appears small, while his own eye appears magnified above all.
Capitalist system built on self-centeredness, while the Quranic society nurtures other-centered thinking. My dear brothers, religion is that system in which intellect and consciousness elevate man to such a level that وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةً 59:9. They give preference to others over themselves, even though they themselves may be in need. You can see the immense contrast between the two approaches. On one side is the mindset of self-centeredness, the inflated I that obstructs the path of truth. On the other side is the higher I, in which a person makes the welfare and well-being of others the very purpose of his life. These are two opposing directions. In the state of intoxication, the individual never gives preference to others. It is only I. But in the Quranic society, the believer's I is transformed into a mission of serving humanity, where self-sacrifice and altruism become the foundation of collective life. It has been a long time since leaving the world of Sufism, yet some of its teaching methods were so captivating that they remain memorable. I wish to explain this matter in the same style. There too, the lesson was taught that one should not see I, but rather see others. When a disciple first came to his teacher, he said, "O master, give me the first lesson." The teacher agreed and locked him in a room. On one side was a window, and in that window he placed plain glass, not a mirror. He asked the disciple, "What do you see?" The disciple replied, "I see others, but not myself." The teacher said, "My son, this is the lesson." The next day, the teacher placed silver behind the glass, turning it into a mirror. He asked again, "Now what do you see?" The disciple replied, "Now I see no one else, only myself." This is the essence of intoxication. The intoxication of wine is of a low and temporary degree, but the intoxication of power, authority, wealth, priesthood, and leadership is far greater. Hai riyaz ikrinde mustakhiram, na piye arju meta jaye. These are those who, without drinking, sway as if intoxicated. Such intoxications are very difficult to fade away. In fact, they do not fade by themselves. They must be removed. Thus, when the Quran speaks of khamr, it first warns that this will obstruct the path. As I explained, in the physical sense, every intoxicant falls under khamr. In the psychological sense, every teaching or emotion that paralyzes intellect and consciousness, inflates the ego, and magnifies the I also falls under khamr. Anything that blinds a person to others and makes him see only himself is included in khamr. It is that which veils humanity. In short, khamr is whatever physical, mental, or psychological covers humanity and makes one see only I.
Effects of wine drinking on human psychology according to the Quran and stories of its popularity in Christianity. As far as khamr, being wine, is concerned, keep in mind that religion gradually brings its program to completion. History tells us, and Quranic verses testify, that human psychology is carefully considered in this process. Wine is a habit, and this habit affects the body's system so deeply that it cannot be abandoned suddenly or overnight. You know that during the life of the Prophet ﷺ in Mecca, wine was deeply ingrained in Arab culture. It was not considered shameful, just as in the West today it is not regarded as shameful. This acceptance in the West is largely due to the influence of Christianity, where wine ceased to be seen as objectionable. That Christianity could not have been the one brought by God's messenger. Rather, it was the version later shaped by human hands. In that altered Christianity, wine holds a special place. The Gospel records the greatest miracle of Jesus ﷺ as turning water into wine at a wedding feast when the supply had run out and people had not yet become intoxicated. According to the altered Gospel, he looked at the jars filled with water and transformed them into wine, which the guests then drank until they were drunk. In Christianity, no one can be considered a true Christian unless he drinks wine at least once a year. During Easter, which commemorates the crucifixion of Jesus ﷺ, it is said that the blood of Christ became wine. In this ritual, drinking a sip of wine is considered sacred, an act of worship, and a form of devotion. Quranic method of gradual prohibition of wine. Wine was as common in Arab society as it is in Western society today. For centuries they had been accustomed to it, and such a habit could not be abandoned in a single day. The Quran therefore introduced its commands gradually. Step-by-step instructions came regarding caution, avoidance, and restraint, until finally, according to historical accounts, in Medina, around the 4th or 5th year after Hijrah, the final command was revealed, and wine was declared completely forbidden. Before that, the Quran's approach was to gradually detach people from this habit, keeping human psychology in view. In the system of religion, this wisdom is always considered, how a harmful practice is to be removed, and what alternative is to be provided in its place. Regarding Khamr, Surah Al-Nisa, verse 43 gives another stage of instruction. But first, in Surah Al-Baqarah, the verse under discussion 219 states only this: wine and gambling contain some benefits, but also harm, and their harm is greater than their benefit. This was the initial step in the gradual process. Quranic clarification about reciting without understanding and the prohibition of intoxication. Surah Al-Nisa contains the verse, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, la taqrabu as-salata wa antum sukara, hatta ta'lamu ma taqulun. 443. O you who believe, do not approach prayer while you are intoxicated until you know what you are saying. This means that in a state of intoxication, one must not come near prayer until full awareness of what is being recited is present. Thus, another restriction was imposed, gradually reducing the habit of drinking. It is noteworthy that the verse also emphasizes understanding. Prayer should only be performed when one knows the meaning of what is being said. Today, however, many recite the Quran or perform prayer without comprehension. Entire recitations are completed in a single night, yet neither the imam reciting nor the listeners know the meaning of the words being spoken. This is contrary to the Quranic instruction, which requires awareness and understanding in worship. The Quran had earlier said, Hatta ta'lamu ma taqulun, 443, until you know what you are saying. This was the second stage of instruction, emphasizing awareness and understanding in worship and prohibiting approaching prayer in a state of intoxication. After this, the final command came in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verses 90 to 91. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, innama al-khamru wal-maysiru wal-ansabu wal-azlamu rijsun min amal al-shaytan, fajtanibuhu la'allakum tuflihun. 590. O you who believe, intoxicants, gambling, idols, and divining arrows are filth from the work of Satan, so avoid them that you may prosper. Then it was said, فَهَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُنْتَهِنُونَ, 591. This was a stern declaration, marking the final stage in which wine was categorically prohibited. Some people ask, and you can understand the motive behind such questioning, why wine was not declared haram in the same way as pork. They argue that the Quran only said to avoid it, so perhaps drinking occasionally is not harmful. They claim that since the word haram was not used, wine is not strictly forbidden. Remember, the Quran uses the word haram for food items such as pork, flowing blood, carrion, and anything dedicated to other than Allah. Wine, khamr, is not part of daily food items, so it was not listed among those four, but this does not mean it is permitted. The Quran says clearly, Rijsun min amal shaitani fajtanibuh. It is filth from the work of Satan, so avoid it. And then, فَهَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُنْتَهُونَ. Will you not then desist? This is a categorical command. To call it not haram is misleading, because the Quran has declared it a satanic act, a filth that halts human development, and has ordered complete abstinence from it. This is indeed a major challenge. Some argue that since the Quran did not use the word haram for wine, it must not be strictly forbidden. But look carefully at the Quran's ruling. The word sharab in Arabic simply means drink. It applies to any liquid consumed, not specifically to wine. In our usage, sharab has come to mean alcohol, but in the Quran, the word used is khamr. If Islamic societies legislate on khamr, the law must clearly define what khamr includes. It is not enough to equate it only with wine. Khamr refers to anything that intoxicates, clouds the intellect, or veils human consciousness. Therefore, when it comes under legal prohibition, it must be specified precisely what substances fall under this category. The Quran says, Rijsun min amal shaitani fajtanibuh. It is filth from the work of Satan, so avoid it. And then, فَهَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُنْتَهُونَ. Will you not then desist? This is the final and categorical command. Thus, the first thing named and prohibited is khamr, and its scope is broader than just wine. It encompasses all that intoxicates and obstructs human intellect. The second thing mentioned is wal-maisiru. Its common translation is gambling, but it is not limited to gambling alone. Just as khamr was restricted in translation to wine, maisir has been restricted to gambling. If we take the broader meaning, the scope becomes much wider. The word maisir comes from yusur, which means ease. Yisar refers to the left hand, and from this comes the expression of something being very easy. In our own idiom, we say, "This is my left hand's play," meaning something done effortlessly. From yusur comes maisir. According to the Qur'an's teaching, لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى, 53:39, man has nothing except what he strives for. Therefore, every wealth or gain that comes without effort, without struggle, without labor, falls under maisir. When understood in this Qur'anic sense, the implications are far-reaching. It is not only gambling at the table, but every form of unearned wealth, every shortcut to riches without effort that is included in maisir. This is why the Qur'an places it alongside khamr as an obstacle to the development of a just and rational society. Instead of honestly accepting that maisir includes all forms of wealth obtained without effort, where one person labors and another reaps the fruit, people restricted its meaning only to gambling. If its broader definition were acknowledged, then just as society avoids gambling, it would also develop the same mindset toward other unearned gains. But self-deception prevailed. They narrowed its meaning to gambling alone, leaving all other forms of effortless wealth untouched, labeling them halal and tayyib. Even gambling itself was treated selectively. The poor man tossing coins in the marketplace is raided by police, while in clubs and gymkhanas, every evening the same practice continues under the name of bridge. There, no law interferes, and society does not consider it shameful. Thus, the Qur'an's term maisir was confined to a narrow translation, while its true scope, every form of wealth acquired without struggle, was ignored. This narrowing of meaning allowed unjust systems to continue under the guise of legality and respectability. When gambling, maisir, is openly named, the mind immediately associates it with dice, cards, or betting. But in refined circles, the same practice is given elegant names like bridge, and people boast about it proudly. Because it carries a respectable label, no restriction is imposed, no law interferes, and society does not consider it shameful.
The friendly game of bribery, disguised as legal entertainment. This practice is presented as a game, but in reality it is a refined form of bribery. For example, the person who must submit a tender or obtain a permit in the morning goes to the club in the evening and loses 1,000 rupees to the very officer who will decide his case. The officer wins it in bridge, and since it is framed as a game, it is not called bribery. In truth, this is exactly the same mechanism as gambling. The difference is only in the label and the legal cover. Laws were crafted to declare such practices permissible, and who made those laws? The very people who themselves played bridge in the evenings. This is why the Qur'an does not leave lawmaking to human whims. It identifies maisir as every form of wealth gained without effort, where one person works and another reaps the benefit. This stands in direct opposition to the Quranic principle, "Laysa li'insani illa ma sa'a," 53:39. Man has nothing except what he strives for.
Distortion of Quranic terminology to legitimize the unlawful. What happened with Quranic terminology is deeply significant. The words remained the same, but their meanings were deliberately narrowed or altered. Some people openly disregard what the Quran says, but others claim to follow it while reshaping its concepts to suit their interests. For example, maisir was confined to gambling alone, while its broader meaning, any wealth gained without effort, or one person works and another takes the benefit, was ignored. By restricting the definition, all other forms of unearned wealth were declared halal and tayyib, leaving only gambling as unlawful. This is a subtle but powerful distortion. The Quran itself is preserved, its words unchanged, but if the meanings are redefined, then the greatest form of tahrif, alteration, has occurred. The divine principle, laysa lil insani illa ma sa'a, 53:39, man has nothing except what he strives for, was sidelined. Instead of applying it universally, it was limited to a narrow case, and then people began searching for proofs elsewhere. You have seen that the Quran shapes a society in which full labor is performed, its fruit is obtained, and from that fruit only one's own need is kept, while surplus wealth is given to others. This is the system.
In contrast, the prevailing system declares only gambling unlawful, while all other ways of taking the earnings of others' labor are left unrestricted. Lines are drawn on the land and ownership is claimed. Within those boundaries, the poor farmer works all year, sweating and toiling to produce crops, yet the one who drew the line or his forebears takes at least half of the yield home. This is called muzara'at, and it is considered lawful, not maisir. In trade, one person works day and night, while another invests money as a sleeping partner. The profits come, but more than half goes to the investor. This is called mudara'at, and again it is considered lawful, not maisir. Thus, maisir has been reduced to mean only gambling, while the Quran's broader definition, every form of wealth gained without effort, where one person labors and another takes the result, has been ignored.
Quranic system of life and its strongest opposition to khamr, masir, and chance. This is what happens with religion. Khamr and masir are two things that obstruct the path. You have seen that when the intellect is clouded, and when matters are left to chance, reason and thought are suspended. In games of chance, what role does intellect play? Gambling depends on dice, and the outcome of the dice is beyond human reasoning. Yet the prohibition was limited only to gambling. Lotteries, divinations, drawing lots, and even making decisions based on dreams. All these practices not only became permissible, but were even considered religiously recommended. People go to so-called saints to have lots drawn for them. But the Quran declares that man has been given intellect and thought, and that he must make his decisions in the light of reason and thought, within the boundaries set by the Quran. Quranic principle of reason versus superstitious practices. Instead of using intellect and thought, people resort to divinations and lots. Decisions that should be made by the human mind are handed over to arbitrary practices. For example, in Divana Imam Hafiz, people draw a fall. How is it drawn? Perform ablution, sit down, close your eyes, open the book, and the first line on the right-hand page is taken as the decision for you. Neither your mind nor your reasoning is engaged, yet this becomes the verdict. Such decisions are made through lots, lotteries, and istikhara. Intellect and thought are suspended, and those who do this are considered sacred. The idea is that once intellect is silenced, then spirituality remains. At its extreme, this spirituality is seen in those called majsub, people who in other contexts would be sent to mental hospitals, but here they are revered as reached ones. The difference is explained. The salik climbs step by step on the ladder of spiritual progress, while the majsub leaps suddenly, breaking the legs of intellect. This is the state of a nation that every morning sits with the Quran, reciting it for reward, yet abandons the very command of the Quran to use intellect and thought in making decisions. End result of deceptive intellect, seeing oneself as a sinner rather than a criminal. Khamr and maisir are the two greatest obstacles in the path of the Quranic system. Notice the Quran's style. قُلْ فِيهِمَا إِثْمٌ كَبِيرٌ وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ 2:119. It acknowledges that some benefits can be claimed. Regarding wine, it may be said that it acts as a tonic, giving strength, movement, and warmth. Regarding maisir, if taken only as gambling, one loses while another wins. For the deceptive intellect, such arguments suffice. Yet the Quran declares ithmun, a grave violation. In translation, however, another distortion occurred. The Quran uses different terms for the consequences of unlawful acts: ardwan, ifyan, dhanub, khata, itham. But in our translations, all of these were rendered simply as sin. Thus, sin became a vague mental concept, while crime remained something distinct. As a result, many revered figures, in their humility, which often masked pride and arrogance, would write after their names, so-and-so, sinner, guilty, disobedient servant. Yet what they were actually describing was crime. If they were asked to replace these words with so-and-so, criminal number 10, they would never agree. To call oneself part of a criminal tribe would be shameful, even auctionable for defamation. But to write sinner, guilty, disobedient is considered honorable humility. This distortion created a mindset where people saw themselves superficially as sinners, but never truly as criminals. In reality, the Quran's language points to crime, violations of divine law with real consequences, not merely abstract sins that can be worn as badges of piety. What happened is that we changed the meanings of words, altering their concepts, while the Quran's chosen terms carry subtle distinctions. Here the Quran uses the phrase ithmun kabirun, 2:119. To understand itham, consider how Arabs described a caravan. When camels were lined up in a row, if one camel or she-camel became weak, lagged behind, grew weary, and could not keep pace, they called it naqatun ithma.
The term implied exhaustion, depression, weakness, and decline in the power of action. Thus, when the Quran says about khamr and maisir, قُلْ فِيهِمَا إِثْمٌ كَبِيرٌ, it means these are things that bring about weariness, decline, and loss of vitality and human action. The apparent benefit is that drinking wine gives temporary strength, energy, and warmth, so much so that one feels ready to move mountains. But once the intoxication, the khumar, subsides, the body collapses into weakness, bones ache, and exhaustion overtakes. This is the deeper meaning of ithm, not just sin in a superficial sense, but the crippling of human energy and productivity, the undermining of human capacity for constructive action.
Quranic description of ithm in khamr and maisir. The drunkard cannot escape his condition. After intoxication subsides, the exhaustion and decline that follow drive him back to wine again, seeking temporary warmth and movement to counteract the collapse. This cycle becomes habitual and unbreakable. In Arabic, this state of post-intoxication weakness and decline is called ithm. The Quran explains that after the brief benefit, the real outcome is ithmilal, deterioration of strength, incapacity, and loss of productive ability. The same applies to maisir. Wealth gained without effort may appear beneficial, with large bank balances and apparent prosperity. But over time, the capacity to labor and the habit of striving are destroyed. When these avenues close, a person is left unable even to earn his daily bread. Thus, the Quran declares, Ithmun kabirun, 2:19. The apparent benefits of khamr and maisir are temporary, but ithmuhun akbaru min naf'ihima, 2:19. Their harm is far greater than their benefit. The lasting result is decline, incapacity, and the erosion of human strength and productivity.
Quranic remedy for human decline and backwardness in khamr and maisir. Remember, this is the Quran's guidance regarding these two matters. After mentioning them, it says, Yes, alunaka mada yunfikun, 2:19. Now they ask, since these two paths are closed, we earn through labor, but in that earning there is both benefit and ithm. How much of it belongs to us? Reflect, dear ones. On one side is maisir, where others toil and someone else takes away the fruit of their labor. On the other side is the Quranic system, where one works himself, earns through effort, and then asks, how much should I keep for myself and how much should I give to others? In this single word lies your entire economic system. Today, volumes are written, pages are filled, and endless debates are held about what is against Islam and what is in accordance with Islam. But the Quran's question is simple. From your own earnings, how much should you keep and how much should you give to those whose needs cannot be met from their own earnings or who are no longer able to earn? The Quran answers, Kul al-afwa, 2:19. Say to them, whatever is beyond your own need, give it all away. Why should surplus be kept? It belongs to others. Dear ones, man calls himself Ashraf al-Makhlukat, the noblest of creation. Consider an animal, a bull for instance, with a heap of fodder before it. While eating, it does not let anyone come near until its stomach is full. This is animal instinct. But once it is satisfied, it sits calmly, closes its eyes and chews the cud. It does not care who takes away the surplus. In contrast, man, after filling his stomach, stations guards over the surplus and still claims to be the noblest of creation. The Quran says, Kal an'ami balhum adallu, 7179. They are like cattle, rather even more astray, for even animals do not hoard what is beyond their need. Meanwhile, thousands and millions of people are deprived, their children without a morsel of bread, while in other homes, after fulfilling all needs, treasures upon treasures are stored away. The Quran commands, Kul al-afwa, 2:19. Say, whatever is beyond your need, give it all away. The determination of this surplus too will be made by the Quranic system.
Quranic view, khamr, maisir, and surplus wealth as forbidden. Whether it is khamr, maisir, or surplus wealth, all these are things that paralyze human intellect and weaken constructive capacity, and therefore they are forbidden. Basic needs are universal and equal for every human being. Hunger requires bread. The need of a laborer is the same as that of an engineer. Clothing, shelter, and medicine in illness are fundamental necessities for all. Beyond these, there are needs specific to one's work. For the laborer, tools like hammer and pickaxe are essential. For the engineer, instruments and equipment related to his profession are necessary.
The system ensures that each person is provided with the means required for the work assigned to him. Fundamental needs remain equal for everyone. Some argue that even in food and drink there are differences. True, but the principle remains. If you give a laborer's child toast with butter and honey, his stomach will ache. This shows that extravagance beyond basic needs is not natural, and the Qur'an system is designed to provide for genuine necessities, not indulgence. Dear brothers, in response to this question the Qur'an has said, Al-Afu 2:19. The system is responsible for fulfilling the basic necessities of life for every individual. It must also provide for specific needs related to each person's work. How this is organized, the system itself will determine, whether by distribution, allocation, or provision. The Qur'an states, يَسْأَلُونَكَ مَاذَا يُنْفِقُونَ قُلِ الْعَفُوَ 2:19. They ask what they should spend. Say, whatever is beyond your own need. Listen carefully. Anything that paralyzes intellect and thought is forbidden. Khamr, intoxicants, maisir, unearned wealth, and surplus hoarded wealth all fall into this category. The Qur'an concludes, كَذَلِكَ يُبَيِّنَ اللَّهُ لَكُمُ الْآيَاتِ. Thus Allah makes His commands clear for you.
Qur'an's claim of perfection versus human verdicts. The Qur'an's author himself declares that his book is free from every flaw, yet here verdicts are issued that this book is ambiguous or incomplete. The Qur'an says it is detailed. كَذَلِكَ يُبَيِّنُ اللَّهُ لَكُمُ الْآيَاتِ 2:19. But people claim otherwise, as if it were borrowed or lacking. Notice the Qur'an's method. It elevates your intellectual faculties and then presents the framework, asking you to reflect. It says, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَفَكَّرُونَ 2:19. This is the point, that you think, reason, and arrive at conclusions. It explains clearly, Khamar and Maisir are heavy obstacles in the path of the system. It declares that surplus beyond need is foolish the hoard and must be given to others. These clarifications are made so that you may reflect, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَفَكَّرُونَ, and see what results you reach through intellect and thought. Qur'an invites reflection on both present and future, this world and the hereafter. Now listen to the Qur'an's unique feature and rejoice. The field of intellect and thought is declared to be this natural world, and worldly matters can indeed be understood through reasoning. Beyond this, people often claim that human intellect cannot reach. But the Qur'an says, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَفَكَّرُونَ 2:19. فِي الدُّنْيَا, yes, in worldly affairs use your intellect and thought. Everyone agrees with this. Yet the Qur'an adds, تَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ 2:19-20. Reflect not only on the present, the immediate, the urgent benefits, but also on the future, the hereafter. The Qur'an teaches that while temporary gains may appear attractive, when you extend your vision beyond the immediate, you will see the immense harm hidden within. Thus, tafakkur, reflection, is commanded for both this world and the next. Unlike the religious mindset that forbids thought in worldly matters, the Qur'an insists on reflection, reasoning, and insight not only for worldly affairs, but also for the hereafter. This shows the exalted place given to human intellect in the Quranic system.
Quranic meaning of yatim, any individual who feels alone in society. The Quran says, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْيَتَامَى 2:20. In our language, yatim is restricted to one whose parents have died. But in Arabic, yatim means any person who is left alone, without support. When hardship falls upon him, it remains his burden alone, with no one to share it. In usage, even a girl who reaches marriageable age but cannot marry, not by choice but due to circumstances, was called yatim. A widow was also called yatim. Essentially, anyone who is left solitary is termed yatim. You may have heard the expression durre yatim, the lone pearl in a shell. Thus, yatim means one who remains alone within society. The Qur'an's command of al-af, 2:19, giving away surplus beyond need, is directly connected to them. It is not about someone sitting alone under a tree in the wilderness, but about those who live in crowded towns and cities, amidst gatherings and communities, yet feel utterly alone in their struggles. And when you look closely, you will see that most of us fall into this category of yatim. Only a few have true heirs or supporters. The rest live as solitary beings. For them, the surplus wealth, al-af, is meant.
Quranic meaning of sulh, removing social inequalities and making the lonely your brothers. The Quran continues, قُلْ إِصْلَاحٌ لَهُمْ خَيْرٌ, 2:2020. The word sulh means to create harmony, to remove unevenness, to eliminate the imbalances that arise in society. When someone is left alone, marginalized, or isolated, this imbalance must be corrected. Doing so is a great act of goodness. Then it says, وَإِن تُخَالِطُوهُمْ فَإِخْوَانُكُمْ, 2:2020. Do not leave them apart, mix them into your society. This ikhlat or ikhtilat is not limited to business partnership. The context is about yatim, those left alone. To mix with them means to integrate them into your community, to remove their sense of isolation. And why should you do this? The Quran answers, فَإِخْوَانُكُمْ. Those who are alone, without support, are your brothers. Their inclusion is not charity, it is fraternity. This is the Quranic concept of sulh, to heal social fractures, to erase inequalities, and to transform the lonely into family.
Quranic society. Every lonely person is your brother. We have confined the idea of brotherhood only to blood relations. Think of those whose parents, siblings, or family members were lost during times of upheaval and division. Years later, sometimes through newspapers, brothers are reunited after decades, recognizing each other through signs. Until then, they did not know they were brothers. The Quran says, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْيَتَامَى وَإِن تُخَالِطُوهُمْ فَإِخْوَانُكُمْ. Those who are left alone in society are yatim because you did not realize they were your brothers. The Quran reveals they are indeed your brothers. Once you know this, no philosopher's reasoning is needed to tell you to embrace them. Notice how after mentioning al-yatama, the Quran immediately says ikhwanukum. It is declaring that in a Quranic society, every person who feels alone, unsupported, or marginalized is your brother. True fraternity is not limited to blood ties. It extends to all who are left solitary. The verse concludes, وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ الْمُفْسِدَ مِنَ الْمُصْلِحِ. Allah knows which society creates inequalities and pushes people into isolation, and He knows which society removes imbalances and makes the lonely into brothers. All your troubles stemmed from not knowing this truth. We have confined ourselves to blood relations only. Those whose parents, brothers, or sisters were lost during the time of division, afterward no one knew where they were. Sometimes in newspapers it is reported that after 20 years brothers met again. They recognized each other through signs, and then realized that this was their brother. During that time, they did not know he was their brother. The Quran says, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْيَتَامَى وَإِن تُخَالِطُوهُمْ فَإِخْوَانُكُمْ. Those who remained alone in society were yatim because you did not know they were your brothers. The Quran tells you they are your brothers. Once you know this, no philosopher's wisdom is needed to explain that you should embrace them. See how after al-yatama, the Quran immediately says ikhwanukum. It declares that in a Quranic society, every person who feels alone, unsupported, or isolated is your brother. Even in our society, real brothers sometimes fail to remain brothers, but the Quran says that every lonely person in the world is your brother. Every great program begins on a small scale. We have explained, so now there is no reason for anyone to remain in distress. Inna Allaha Azizun Hakimun, 2220. Remember, these matters are presented through intellect and reasoning, but they are not left merely as sermons for you to accept or reject at will. A system will be established in which no one remains alone and everyone becomes a brother to one another. This too is known. Through the system, whatever is implemented becomes evidence of Allah being Aziz, mighty, and wherever matters are explained rationally, it is an expression of His being Hakim, wise. Society will grow vast, but as mentioned earlier, the Quran gives great importance to the family unit. Whatever it intends to establish on a large scale in society, it begins first on a small scale within family life. From here, it provides training. If you want to reform any society, start with its home. How does society come into being? If you remove the walls to the right and left of your house, the house expands into society. As I often say, in the morning when you leave your home, you call it society, wherever you go. In the evening when you return within those four walls, you call it home again.
Home and society are not two separate things. Society is the expanded form of the home, and the home is the condensed form of society. If you want to reform society, reform the homes. Remember, a home without harmony cannot produce harmony in society. The Quran does not only create harmony within the home, it provides a way to make the home a paradise. And when all homes in society become paradises, society itself becomes paradise. Paradise is built here. Alongside this, the Quran also presents the picture of hell.
Every home is the foundation of society. The beginning of a home is with the covenant between husband and wife, which is called aqd. A mature, responsible man, capable of making decisions by his own will, enters into this covenant with a woman. Together, they decide to lay the foundation of a home, forming a small unit of society. What is the basic condition for this? In our culture, the conditions are well known. What does the boy do? Is he a CSP officer, an audit and account service, earning a certain salary? What does his father do? Does he own a mansion, a car? What does the girl's father do? What will he give along with the daughter? The Quran, however, said something different. It declared that man alone is lighter in weight compared to the woman. Therefore, it is necessary that with this covenant, he must give her a gift from himself so that the scales between them are balanced. Give her something, because your weight alone is less compared to hers. This was the Quran's view of the woman's status. Today, in this orphan society, when a girl grows up in a home, the father cannot sleep at night. In the evening, he looks at her with worry, and she, seeing her father's despair, lies awake on her bed. Neither she sleeps nor does he. The Quran commanded that something must be given with her. Her education, upbringing, training, making her a human being. Along with this, something additional must be provided. But look at today's demands. The boy is a government servant, even if he is just a 60 rupee clerk. He is matriculate, while the girl is an MA. And then comes the question, what will be given along with her? The demands continue endlessly.
Foundation of domestic life in human existence. Dear ones, humanity cries out at this concept that you make a covenant to live life with another human being, yet ask what material gain will come with it. Curse upon such thinking. The Quran says, if you build a home on these standards, yes, you may get a mansion, a car, and all such things, but the difference will be that the home becomes hell. Just that much difference. The Quran then shows how a home becomes paradise. It says there's only one thing to look for: harmony of thought and vision, alignment of ideas, beliefs, convictions, and temperament. When these are in harmony, when there is unity in these inner dimensions, then the home becomes paradise. According to the Quran's standard, the final form of this harmony of thought and vision is called ideology or iman. When the Quran speaks of sharing iman, it does not mean that both were born in Muslim households. That is not the question at all. The real question is the unity of belief, conviction, and outlook.
Quranic terms: kafir, mushrik, and mu'min. As I mentioned earlier, no child is born a Muslim or a kafir. One becomes so through beliefs, thoughts, and convictions. The complete and pure collection of ideas, beliefs, and outlooks is called iman. This is pure faith. In contrast, if other elements are mixed into it, it is called shirk. The Quran's precision is remarkable. Here it does not use kufr. A kafir is one who outright rejects, who does not accept at all. But the Quran identifies another category, those who accept certain truths, yet mix them with their own additions. These are called mushrik. The Quran presents the ultimate example, unity of thought and vision versus contradiction of thought and vision. Unity is called mu'min, contradiction is called mushrik. It says, وَلَا تَنْكِحُوا الْمُشْرِكَاتِ حَتَّى يُؤْمِنَّ. Do not marry women whose thoughts are not in harmony with yours until they believe. Your standard was that she belongs to a wealthy household. The Quran says, وَلَا تُنْكِحُوا الْمُشْرِكِينَ حَتَّى يُؤْمِنُوا وَلَا عَبْدٌ مُؤْمِنٌ خَيْرٌ مِّن مُشْرِكٍ وَلَوْ أَعْجَبَكُمْ. 2:21. Remember, a believing servant, even if she is a maid in a household, is far better than a wealthy woman who owns mansions and cars,
but whose thoughts are not in harmony with yours.
Quran gives men and women equal right to choose. Now see, the question is not only whom a man prefers. According to the Quran, both man and woman must equally have the right of preference. It says, وَلَا تُنْكِحُ الْمُشْرِكِينَ حَتَّى يُؤْمِنُوا. O believing women, do not marry a man whose ideology differs from yours, whose thoughts and outlook are not in harmony with yours, even if his job, his mansions, his business, his wealth, or his bank balance seem attractive to you. The Quran continues, وَلَا عَبْدٌ مُؤْمِنٌ خَيْرٌ مِّن مُشْرِكٍ وَلَوْ أَعْجَبَكُمْ. A believing servant, even if he is a household worker, is better than a wealthy man who owns mansions and cars but whose thoughts are not in harmony with yours. It warns, أُولَٰئِكَ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى النَّارِ. Those who persuade you into such marriages are inviting you to hell, turning your home into a place of misery. And it says, وَاللَّهُ يَدْعُو إِلَى الْجَنَّةِ وَالْمَغْفِرَةِ بِإِذْنِهِ. Allah invites you to paradise and protection. Then, وَيُبَيِّنُ آيَاتِهِ لِلنَّاسِ. See how clearly he explains his signs to people. لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَذَكَّرُونَ. So that they may always keep this in mind when making decisions, and thus turn their homes into paradise. Up to verse 221 of Surah Al-Baqarah we have come. Dear brothers, the matter of family life continues. Commands will follow. Now begins the stage of Quranic injunctions, which we shall take up next. رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ.